we have just a couple presentations to get caught up here. Why don't we start with Stephen's going to give us a technical update. We've made some good steps, or about to make some good steps there. Stephen? Go ahead. Sorry, I can introduce. Get her to sit there so she. Oh yeah, that's the first thing. Yeah.
Before y'all get started, Mike actually is on the physical handset, not actually on the computer, but on the actual dial-in with the telephone. And when he talks, y'all can't hear him. Is that?
Is he on mute?
Oh, I do. Yeah.
Is there a mute that affects the phones?
So I've got him on mute. Here, do you want me to
Okay. Yes, we can mute it. Okay, you should be able to talk.
Dan.
Hello? Why isn't he going?
Hello?
Okay.
Hear me now?
Yeah, Michael?
You bet. Very well.
It's Michael. Yeah, you guys found a really nice way to keep me quiet, right?
It worked.
Yeah. I heard everything you guys said the minute I came on, and I was like, but they're not hearing me. So anyway. All right.
Everything was muted at this end. It was just muted until things got started here. We'll go ahead and turn it over to Secretary Dameron's here, and we're going to begin with introductions.
Well, good afternoon. I'm happy to meet several of y'all. This is new to me, but I'm very much a data person, very excited about where we can go with data. So please understand that I'm kind of getting to areas that I don't know about data here. I know about large data sets. I know about running data. I haven't been a scientist at UNM for the past 8 years before I came here. But let's go around. If each of y'all would introduce yourselves and tell me who you're connected with and your background, then we'll go ahead and get started.
Thank you. My name is Eric Spencer. I'm with the Public Education Department, and I'm the director of the College and Career Readiness Bureau. And one of the things that we do in the Bureau is administer the Carl E. Perkins Career Technical Education Improvement Act. And post-secondary institutions are recipients of the Act, and we want to get involved. Thank you, Anita, for the invite, to see how maybe we can intersect with our data collection needs and issues related to that funding source. Great.
My name is Elaine Perea, and I work with Eric, and I do a lot of his data. and I've been working with Anita and Dina quite a bit in the last few months.
I'm Mark Chisholm. I'm a consultant here at the department right now, but worked at UNM for a long time, and I've been part of this council since even before it started, and been working with longitudinal data systems for most of my career. Helped build an early one in Colorado back in the 80s. And so I have a strong interest in this and a lot of ideas about where it can go and what we might be able to do with it.
Great.
I'm Brent Davis with Sapphire Energy, but really here on behalf of the Employability Partnership and the State Workforce Board. And my background is certainly very heavy in data analytics, and tying data together. So I'm here to help.
Great. Michael?
Excuse me, Michael Wright, Higher Education Department. I'm from adult education. Essentially, we are excited about adding additional data to the longitudinal database, GED and high school equalencies.
Jeremy Howard, I'm with CYFD Juvenile Justice. I'm the JJS Data Bureau Chief. Worked with juvenile justice data for the past 10 years, and before that I was actually in the field.
And I'm Raymond Vito. I'm the data manager with CYFD with Early Childhood Services. And as it relates to this project, we're currently working on the Race to the Top federal grant, and where we're aligning our data systems so that we can have a longitudinal database and with Department of Health. And I think eventually the P20W system will align itself with the early.
That would seem very appropriate.
So I'm Edward Rose. I just recently joined here at HCD as an application developer, and I do IT system support. I work under Dan Gillespie with Stephen, Dina, Anita, and I'm here to help where I can.
Great.
And I'm Dina Vine, Director of Planning and Research. I am also responsible, my division with Anita and David, responsible for the data collection from all the institutions. and we have a vested interest in this SLDS system. It will bring us very close to what our policy questions that the stakeholders want to answer. I'm really excited about this project.
I'm Anita Gavin, and I'm an analyst with the Higher Education Department, and I just do what Dina tells me.
I'm Dan Koleski, IT Director here, and Stephen's about to speak on one of the projects we are working on. And then I'm going to handle this.
Yes, everybody on the phone. I want to hear who else on the phone. Are there a lot?
These are the ones on. Okay.
Yeah, I want to hear them say something.
Andy?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm Andy Hedden. I work at PED, and I'm one of the IT folks here to work for Mike.
I'm Fred Littlebridge. I work at DACC.
I'm sorry.
Oneonta Community College.
Oh, thank you.
Angela, are you there, Angela? Can you hear me?
Yes, I finally went and I just called in because I was having a hard time hearing through the computer, but I'm here. It's Angela Peinado, and I'm with the Administrative Office of the Courts.
Kate Chavez?
Hi, I'm Kate Chavez. I'm with the Legislative Finance Committee.
David, you're in there? Called in? I can't hear.
Sound developed.
Oh, we can't unmute that. Okay, Fred. Julie? Julie, can you hear us?
Hi. Yes, I can. Julie Lopez-Casals, Department of Workforce Solutions, analyst with IT.
We're having a Fred.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, he was on.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can hear you. Okay.
Michael?
Okay.
Hello, Madam Secretary. This is Michael Artek. I'm the Chief Information Officer with the Public Education Department. I'm also your co-chair on the Data Systems Council, and so I look forward to sitting down and having a chat with you as we move forward. Been involved with the data system for quite some time, and I apologize for not being there. It's session time for us here, as well as it is for you, but and we've got PARC going on right now, so I'm sure everyone's heard about PARC, and we're keeping a really close eye on that. So I look forward to meeting Madam Secretary, and where we can get together and look at co-chairing the Data Systems Council. Welcome.
Yes, I'm looking forward to meeting with, thank you, Michael, looking forward to meeting with you in great detail about this and moving forward on this. Sounds good. Tracy's on?
Thank
you. Muted? Thank you, Michael.
I'm sorry, I can't understand this for some reason.
Okay.
They're muted.
They're self-muted.
Yeah, they're still. Deputy Secretary?
Sure. This is Andrew Jacobson. I'm the Deputy Secretary here at Higher Ed.
I'm Stephen Azuma.
And if I could say one more thing.
Yes, go ahead, Michael.
This is Michael. I wanted to say hello to everybody. Thanks for coming, guys. I'm sorry I couldn't be there with you, but thanks to all the members.
We're sorry, too. You'll owe us one. It's okay.
Yeah, I'm Stephen Azuma. I'm in IT. I work with Dan, and I help out on the technical side for the SLDS. So we thought we'd begin today with just a technical update for the DSC. We're going to discuss the technical activities we've undertaken over the past several months, and just to catch you up, and then let you know where we're going to go from there. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, so if you go to the next slide, please. You can hit Control-L if you want to go full screen. Yeah. Do it again. Okay. So specifically what we're going to talk about on the technical side is the work we've done to create a prototype infrastructure. In one simple sentence, that's basically we worked to set up the tools and resources to support prototype development. So it's not a complete prototype, but it's the environment so that we can move forward and create one. All right, and we brought this idea to the DSC in December 2014, and we proposed that the data stewards or their representative would identify a small number of specific state-level policy questions. So data stewards are the working group with the DSC who deal with data, research, and analysis questions. They're basically our business representatives if we define business as the business of the agencies or organizations that are part of the DSC. So they would identify a small number of those policy level, state level policy questions, and then we determine which ones would be viable with existing data and resources, which those are limited. So next slide, please. A prototype would not use a federated data model. Well, what does that mean? A federated model is one that's assembled on demand from independent agency sources. So it's kind of, think of it like, I don't know, a restaurant kitchen where you have all of the ingredients ready, and when the order comes in, you put them together and make the dish. Okay, that's basically a federated data model. Instead of that, it was proposed to use a relatively small data model, use links to access agency data sources, house it here at NMHED, but ultimately put the installation at DoIT, and then make it a proof of concept. So it's not intended to be a permanent system, it's just a proof of concept. Next slide. Why are we doing that? Why are we creating a proof of concept or a pilot? Well, we've got at least 4 reasons to do that, and they are to identify and refine requirements for a final system, so that if we were to make a proposal or go for funding or grant, we'd have a good idea of what we were after. Identify and address technical and data issues. We know those exist. We want to tackle them and at least have an understanding of the scope and scale of the problem. Understand the scope and tasks to build a final system, so that when we start planning for creating that ultimate SLDS, we'll have a sense of what we need to be in it and how big the job is. And then finally, contribute technical input to a funding proposal. So those are 4 items that we think justify the creating of a pilot. What the proposal recommended was to create a small group to work on the prototype design.
just on the website while we had this downtime. I was just actually looking up, so it's still through the National Center for Education Statistics, right? Still through NCES is the funder?
Yes.
Yes. So yeah, I was just looking online actually while we were waiting. So I'm very excited about that and would love to talk with you more. It's really important that our state get that grant. So we need to coordinate amongst the agencies. I take you, PED is taking the lead with it?
Yes. Yes, we will be. So, oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I did send a email to our leadership here. So we will be meeting early next week to throw arms around this, and then yeah, we will have some marching orders. I hope here pretty soon.
Okay.
So
keep us
there as well.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'll just resume here. I'll pick up the pace a little bit. Let me know if I'm going too quickly. I want to keep you all interested and engaged, of course. So what did we put together in the prototype infrastructure? Well, we grouped those functional components into 3 major categories. So accessing, that is enabling the input and output of data. This is accessibility. We set up web server, application server, business intelligence reporting server, and file server. Okay, these are all on separate environments. So again, as I said earlier, if we need to switch them out or compare them or install side-by-side other software components, we can. Then for processing the data, that is creating the prototype data products, we've installed the database server with database integration services, and there's also a facility to develop and maintain business rules and provide data quality checking. And then finally, this is kind of at the bottom, just to let you know that it is kind of a standalone, self-contained, independent environment. We've got firewall, we've got a security server, we're monitoring the environment to forestall any problems. We have a project management server that is source code control and requirements management and so on. There's a software update server and a backup server, of course, to protect all of these various components. Okay, next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, we are leveraging existing licensing and licensing software, hardware, and so on that we already have here at HED. So this is not a new installation. It's just redeploying existing capabilities. And again, just to go over this, this is really only for people who are interested in this type of thing. But for the web application server, we've chosen the IIS. Well, I mean, that was the choice we had, so we made that choice. IIS, Business Intelligence, Tableau, file server, which is using basic Windows file services. The database is supported by SQL Server 2012. Business rules and data quality, again, SQL Server, master data services, and data quality services. The integration is all held together with SQL Server integration services. And then down here, it's the standard HED standard technological components, technologies. So Cisco Firewall, VMware is our virtual machine provider that creates all of these environments. Active Directory for security, TFS, that is Team Foundation Server from Microsoft for project management, source code control, Spotlight for monitoring, a backup server called Veeam, and then software update service. To make sure we have the latest versions of software for security and stability is also Microsoft. Any questions? All right, thank you. One thing, and this is kind of related to Bryn's question. We tried to design this prototype so it would be aligned with a federated model. That is the model I mentioned earlier where you have independent agency data sources that you assemble on demand. How we're doing that is we're using a common data element standard that we've all agreed to here at the DSC before, which is called SED version 5. In this particular prototype, if and when we do data exchange, we'll be using XML documents. And then finally, for the query standard, we'll be using web services. So let's go to the next slide. And here's a picture of that same thing. This gold box here is the scope of the SLDS prototype. This is what we're looking at building, the database and web services to allow queries. Some other parts in there too, as I mentioned before, business intelligence and so on. But how it would look in a federated model is you would have user access up here. Someone would make a query. Now this is beyond the scope of the prototype. I just want to set the context of the prototype and how it would fit into a federated model. So in the future, you would have an SLDS user submitting their queries. It might be a researcher, an analyst, an educator, so on. Then at this layer here, that query would be broken apart into the constituent data elements. For example, higher education data, workforce data. And then it would distribute those portions of the queries to the independent agency data source, as I was mentioning earlier. Those agency data sources would respond, and then the federation layer would reassemble the query and then return it to the user. Mike?
So just for clarity, the previous slide was what HED had in place already. So we're proposing to build this prototype on existing infrastructure.
Exactly.
And but this is just a proposal, or this is already done? I wasn't quite clear.
Yeah, sure. We've installed. If you go back one slide. Sorry, another slide. So we've established servers to support all of these functions. Okay.
Was that new, or that was already here?
That was already here.
No, it's on a new server. These are new virtuals. So it is actually all new infrastructure, but we have existing licensing and things that we've reached over with.
So, again, I'm still learning too as the new secretary. So those servers we have here, is that conjunction with DoIT?
No, it's one box. It's
okay.
new, but within that box, all these virtual servers in one box.
Is that here with us?
We have it now.
Okay.
There's only one thing holding us up, but maybe you can help. We've been waiting how many weeks? 2, 3 weeks for an IP. Once we get the IP structures, we're going to put the box over and do it. And that is literally the only thing we're waiting for. We've been waiting for weeks. And so they could kick the network people and give us an IP. We'll have it there tomorrow.
And do you know about all this?
Use 164.64.
Well, I could tell. Yeah. We need the tunnel created and all that. We just want to put it over there and not have access to it. So we need these IPs so we can create that tunnel and access.
So you've got to get started and all that.
Oh yeah, Vin's helped. He's been encouraging them, hoping we get it from them, and everybody's been pounding on them. So if you could help grease that slide, we're ready to put it over there.
I can ask. I mean,
appreciate it. More people would ask.
But our agencies are cooperating on this?
Oh yeah. Well,
but the important thing is that all of this was not all of this was done. So you bought some hardware to augment this, and then the prototype, what you're proposing in the next slide is what we're here to discuss today. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm trying to Okay. So if you go to the next slide after that. Okay. And so this is where the prototype would sit in a federated model. The reason I'm bringing this slide up, Mike, is in the past people have asked, well, in the long term, ultimately, when you build the full system, won't it be federated? Because agencies should be controlling their own data. I think you've made this point as well, haven't you, Brett? So I just wanted to assure you that when we build the prototype, it will be compatible with that vision in the future. Okay, so Elaine.
Hi. One of the things that we've been challenged with not only is linking PED and HED, but also beyond New Mexico as we try to figure out what happens to students.
Yeah.
Could you address, is the federated level federal?
You would naturally think that, but they are the same thing. I can't address that. I can show you a diagram if you'll indulge me. I'll show it right at the end of the presentation to quickly give you the context of how the federal data sources fit in. Okay. Right. So, if you don't get this, I think it's okay, because this is really just saying that we are going to try and be good citizens and build a prototype work with other states' independent, other agencies' independent data sources. We're not trying to aggregate all of the data in here. We're trying to make it, play nice with everyone else. Next slide, please.
Can I open that? Is it Control L?
Control what? Control L.
There, you got it.
Okay. Could you go back one?
That one? There we go.
All right. So maybe this will clarify, where is everything? All of those virtual servers, they're all living here on our standard physical hosts. We're going to move those to the SIM Secure Data Center where there is one physical server and all of these virtual servers supporting all of those different functions. That's our next step, is to make it, move it to the SIMS Data Center, make it available. Along with that, we're going to develop prototype data integration routines that is extract data, load it, transform it, and cleanse it to put it in this environment. And then finally, collaborate on developing a prototype, an anonymous identifier, and supporting functionality. So that's what we're looking for. That's where we're going to go next with this prototype. We've created the environment, where it's going to live, and then we're looking at following up on these activities next. All right, next slide. Well, this is a bit of a change in direction. This is HB 163, and it proposes a change to the Educational Data System Law, which is the law under which this council operates, which says this is the proposed change: Social Security numbers shall not be used in the data system. Well, I think in the past, it's been our policy not to use them and to develop what you saw earlier, some kind of anonymous identifier. The exact technical specifications of that are not decided, and I think we have a number of possible options that we could use there. So if we could just go to the next slide. Well, to address those potential changes in statute and conform to our current policy, which is not to have them, we're not going to put them inside the SLDS prototype. As I mentioned, we're deploying a standalone site at DoIT in the SIM Secure Data Center to separate out the SLDS prototype and agency data systems, to make a clear boundary, to make it really clear that we're doing what we've been asked to do, what we said we would do, and what potentially might be written into law, so that it's very clear that the SLDS is living over here in the SIM Data Center. And for example, our agency data systems do contain SSNs. So we're trying to create a very clean boundary here. And then configure the security in the prototype environment to enforce those clear boundaries between the SLDS prototype and the agency data systems. All right, next one. Okay, there's one more slide at the request of Elaine, but otherwise, that is what we've been working on in terms of the prototype infrastructure. Again, we put together basically what we had already. So all of the servers, the hardware, the software, it was already acquired for other purposes, and it was just repurposed for use or sharing with SLDS. And so we've set up the tools and resources to support the prototype development. And that prior slide just showed you what direction we want to go in terms of the prototype development. Of course, we're open to input. We're open to collaboration. Any questions? All right, so let's just go to one more slide. Okay, one more. So, beautiful.
Yes.
Thank you. Not my idea.
Yes.
This just helps. Elaine's question was, well, what about federal data? Okay, here's what we've been working on. So if you think of the SLDS prototype as a hub, what potential data do we have to pull in? Well, there's data from U.S. higher education. This isn't specifically federal, but it is data from the National Student Clearinghouse. And that holds 98% of the of higher education institutions in it. And so we can get enrollment and graduation data from there to see the interaction between, say, public higher education and U.S. higher education. We know now that it's a really complicated environment in education, that people get courses, credits, degrees, awards from all sorts of different places. So we can bring that in. So that's, kind of a U.S. That's sort of a U.S. data source. New Mexico adult, New Mexico public schools that we can bring in with a name match. Over here, we've got the other. This is really, I think, the federal workforce data that Elaine was asking about. These boxes, the U.S. workforce and the Western workforce, are white because they're still in the future. We've been working with WICHE, which is the Western Interstate Commission on Higher Education, who have a multi-state longitudinal data exchange to get Western workforce information. But they're still at the MOU stage, as far as I understand. But what we've done is we've aligned our data structure using SEDS v5 and mapping to their data structure so that when they do come online, we can begin to exchange data with the WICHE states who are part of the Western Workforce Multi-State Longitudinal Data Exchange. And then we've been working with DWS on acquiring RIS2 data.
Do you think that data will integrate to the SLDS, or will that data, for example, the higher education data, interface with higher ed, since the prototype is actually a link out into the agencies? I would suspect that it won't link directly out to those entities. The path will have to be through the respective liaison agencies.
Yeah. I'm going to say that it's open and it's for the organizations to negotiate how they want that to go.
But if there's no social security number or ID in the prototype database, it's going to be pretty hard for them to interface with that database.
Yeah.
Well, so to comply statutorily, you're going to have to come back to some entity in the state to be your interface.
That's actually part of the conceit design. So a master super crosswalk table, a person record that has stored all the information for each person as we come across it. So if it's from the higher ed system, we'll have SSN on it. If a name match has been done to public schools, then we'll have the STARS ID from that. We'll have name, birth date, which we would need to go to the National Student Clearinghouse, because that's also a name and birth date match. So we don't use SSN for the regular matches. So that matching file has to sit, maybe do it in a separate space away from the actual SLDS itself, where there'd be an anonymous identifier that would be used to track across time and across entities within the SLDS database. So an anonymous identifier would sit in this master person table. So you'd have to have some process where you took a set of data, submit it to the person table to get the anonymous ID back out, do with it what you needed to do, and then perhaps go the reverse direction. It's a little tricky. We need to, I don't think we've worked out the exact diagrams or security protocols yet, but I can't think of any other way of handling this to be consistent with maintaining security within the system that people are going into and doing their queries, but then able to realistically have semi-reliable matches, especially to the workforce data, both within the state and through RIS2 nationally. And even across our institutions, our DEER system has used SSN for tracking since we put it into place. We're talking as we move forward, putting our SSNs from DEER also into this person database and using that anonymous ID internally in our own database, as well as whatever ends up going into the SLDS. But it's hard to draw that cleanly, but that's the idea that we have in the back of our head as a way of trying to make this work.
So, what I might add on to Mark's explanation is that we're open to collaborate in the development of anonymous identifiers. And I don't think the technical specifics are nailed down at this point. How does that sit with you, Brent?
I like it in concept, but I think about 2.5 miles that way, there's this round building with a lot of people who are not very keen on that.
Yeah, and so that has to be one of the design forces. Right.
So Stephen, I don't see children, youth, and families or for early childhood data in one of those boxes. And then talking about a unique identifier, I mean, we're going through RFP right now, so that way we can get a contract, so that way we can hire that development of the unique ID for the 3 agencies that we're going to pressure.
Yeah, and Ray, you're talking.
PEDs, the existing one at PED, it's with PED, CYD, and DOH data, and so they're creating an additional database separate from the STARS database that will issue out unique IDs.
So
is that Ray?
Could I just address that?
Yes, it is.
First of all, I just want to say that you have my deepest apologies for not including I assume you're thinking of the race to the top data.
Yeah.
And this is just what we have access to now. You said earlier that you were working with DOH and PED on that. And that is definitely part of the landscape. I should point out here, I thought I would, help Elaine, by pulling up this picture. It's not comprehensive. If you don't see it there, it's not exclusive. This just shows what we have now that we can draw on for the prototype. But naturally, when Race to the Top comes to fruition, that can certainly be pulled into this model as well. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and I just think that what we're doing with Race to the Top, there's a lot of commonality with this.
Yeah.
And we're doing it on one end.
Right.
And here this is still in concept still. And so at the end of our, our grant cycle, December, 31st of 2016, we should have something already in place that's going to start doing the data matching between the children and when they start coming in.
Sure. Yeah, and that's why I'm saying that open to collaboration and getting together on the same page. Secretary.
Michael can say something. Michael?
Oh, Ray, that's you out there at CYD, right?
Yes.
Oh, hey, Ray, how you doing? Hey, yeah, Ray's right on. What you're seeing on the slide is basically HEDs and the prototype. We do have to talk a lot about the other data models that are being created, and mainly Race to the Top. So Race to the Top, we met last week down at Workforce Solutions, HED, Workforce Solutions, and PED, and Race to the Top representatives. So there is definitely a collaboration going on, and we are developing databases, and one of the major things that we're addressing is the master personal identifier for matching purposes only. So in relation to HB 163, it really directly will affect us from the standpoint of Social Security use. We don't collect it for our students already, so that's kind of that's a gimme there. But for teachers, we collect Social Security numbers. So as with our teacher evaluation, with some of the educational data dashboards, the things that we're doing here at PED, it will have a major impact when we talk about using the Social Security number as a component of the master ID. So I think both this prototype and the Race to the Top database are addressing that master personal identifier that has to be developed so that we don't share Social Security number right across the board. So I think the models are very close, if not identical, and continued collaboration, and we'll just keep moving forward with it. I think we're making some really good progress in that area. And my Race to the Top project manager isn't at this meeting. He's in Washington right now at a Best Practices SLDS meeting. So he'll be bringing back some prototypes that have already been, not prototypes, but platforms that have been implemented in states like Kentucky, Delaware. So I'm really interested to see those too. So we'll keep collaborating. I think that's the whole key.
That brings up a good point. Thanks, Mike. That brings up a good point for me. Glad to know he's at the SLDS. I was just seeing that online about the Best Practices Conference. That should be interesting. Because I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, so we're here with our prototype, it sounds like, that we're developing. CYFD has raised to the top and stuff they're moving down the track with. PED has some stuff they're moving down the track with. At the end of the day, yeah, I'm from HED, but I'm really interested at the end of the day at the state, at the broad basis on the state. I'm not just wed to what we're doing here. Who is coordinated? I think it was what Dan and I were talking about earlier. By staff and the data council, plays a role in that. The other day I'm interested in how are we as a state using this data, and how are we herding the cats of our different agencies so we can all be together. At the end of the day, we have policymakers looking at this data. We're getting something done. We're making some wise decisions. We're advising the governor a good way, advising the legislature a good way, and whatever all we're supposed to be doing with this. And I'm even a bit more confused now because it sounds like we have several horses on a racetrack, and some are out, and some we're all different places. But at the end of that racetrack, don't we all want to have accessible data, fix all these numbers? I mean, I come from cancer work. We kind of get through all this so we can cure cancer at the end of the day, and we have all kinds of patient identification stuff we have to be sensitive to. So I'm getting a little confused because I hear all these good different things. I agree with Mike, we need continued collaboration, but and maybe I can have a conversation with the other secretaries. How can we all come together so at the end, as we're all moving our horses down the track, at the end we have what's good for the state?
Well, I wonder if this is a good segue to kind of go into the governance discussion phase of this meeting. Does that make sense to you, Secretary?
Yeah.
Okay, so that means I can make unless there's more technical questions, I can make my escape. Okay, well, Mike, just point out.
It's not part of Citrix.
Just point of clarification. So this is a proposal that's on the table, or is this is something that's been accomplished? I'm not quite sure where we are.
Yeah. So what we've done is we've established the basic environment. Just the database server software, stood up the databases.
So yeah, I got the hardware part.
Yeah.
I'm on the project at the beginning, right? And there's a part in a project called mining.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll have to do it for every one. So you just say that.
Right.
Different data fields.
You want to say chapter 1, and you can rename it later.
No, it is a book format.
Anything gets PNG by default.
Hold on just a minute. Can people on the phone would really entertain your questions? Otherwise, can you mute yourself, please? We're having a lot of conversation in the background.
Yeah. So that's. Thank you for asking that question. So where we are in the phase is we're basically coming back saying, okay, we can't really go any farther until we've written the project and charter.
But I mean, I
the project charter. That's basically
the faster way of doing it is going into
the DSC.
The other interesting part.
Do this for every slide?
Only you could text to the presenter, the chat, and ask him if there's going to be a download later.
We need you guys to mute, please. We're overhearing conversations.
And that would save you the time. So that's a choice. Instead of you have a choice for the presenter to decide if you
Does that response make sense to you?
Can you repeat?
I'm going to mute that.
Yeah.
RLD.
So here we are. We're back.
Excuse me, can someone there please mute your phone? Your conversation's really interesting, but we need to be able to hear information here. So every time, just mute your phone if you would, please. Thanks.
So since last DSC, we've gone away. We put together some basic building blocks for the prototype. Not really making any assumptions, just putting together with what we have, just to make a starting point. Now we're kind of returning to the DFC to say, okay, this is a governance issue. We need to have the people come together in order to.
I understand the governance topic, but
yeah.
In your prototypes, do you have data from U.S. higher education in Mexico, adult education in Mexico, public schools, public higher ed, and workforce?
No, we don't. We have the ability to pull that data. We've done the background work on it. We have the prototype matching algorithms. We understand the data sources, but we have not pulled it together yet.
It's just the infrastructure.
Because in order to pull it together, we want to first have the basic business questions. What do we need to answer with this? What are your objectives? What are my objectives? What is my project charter? I don't have that yet. That's why I'm back here saying, okay, so that works with you? Okay, Mark.
The original idea was to find, with some agreement, 5 or 6 questions that we could maybe answer with the data that we currently have access to. And in the meantime, go through a prototype and have all the opportunity that Stephen talked about in terms of building the virtual theaters, doing the loading and doing the cleaning and using the BI tool and so forth. Because my experience is that we'll see ways that we could have built the structures better once we actually start trying to use them. In the meantime, Race to the Top and these other efforts are going on. So we may start from scratch and build something brand new once we're ready to go into the full SLDS. But the thought is that we will have learned a lot. And so what we currently have access to is some matching that Stephen's done, all name matching with some PED graduate data. We're able to link to the UI wage history data, and we have quite a few years of higher education data for public institutions. So it seemed like there were a wide range of potentially useful state-level policy issues. And if we could narrow them down, figure out which data elements that we currently have are available to answer that question, we might have another question where we go, that's a really important question, but with what we currently have, we can't really address it yet. And then go about and putting together the subset of existing data with some sort of governance group into the structure that Stephen is trying to create and try to come out with some specific reports. And one reason I pushed for that was because we've been talking about doing this for a very, very long time. I thought it would be nice to actually see some real results. And if there is a grant application being written, it could potentially help with the grant application because we would have some concrete data in terms of scope, size, resources, what it really would take, and be able to show what we could really do if we had more resources and we could pull everything all in. So and we talked about this at the last council meeting. There was sort of an agreement to proceed. So Stephen's built this model infrastructure. We worked with Joe to have a place to put it, but we actually haven't defined the specific data model or elements yet, and we haven't defined what the specific questions will be. That's something that this group or a subgroup or some governance group really could come together and try to help us formulate. That's sort of the idea about where we're going. So we're not trying to jump ahead of anybody. We're just trying to do something useful and concrete with what we currently have as a building block for everybody else is putting together what they're doing.
So add on from the Employee Building Partnership, there was a list of questions or a list of pieces of information on a given individual that asked for HED. There's a list of information that was asked for PED. There was a list of information that we asked once we start getting these identifiers around for workforce solutions. The HED questions, if you want to know, the request was the year or semester, month, whatever, how it comes out, how they entered the institution, what institution was entered, the major. If it was not there, we take it from the CUP data, the graduation data, the CIP code, the remedial classes taken by credit course, the yearly remedial classes taken, credit total by year, cumulative GPA, SAT score of note, ACT score of note, year graduated. If you notice, that's different than year entered the process. Degree graduated, and we have it in here, but we've got it around. There was a question of just if we would know gender.
Yeah, I guess all I could really say is that those are data elements, and I think what Mark is referring to is state-level policy questions that would be answered with those data elements. I think we're talking about different things here.
It's a basic data set. We established questions for HED. Mike Archibald has a similar list as this for PED, and at the time, Joy Forehand has a list in DWS that we had asked for as well, so that when we started looking at a body all the way through the system, we had some chunk of data associated with that. No, it wasn't the final list for the past, but so we look at that and start saying, does this answer questions?
So were these lists given to the agencies to get that information?
They were.
Okay.
But we don't have a people match yet. So the ultimate is, as we had a conversation yesterday, if you look at me through PED, and I was fortunate enough to go through HED in the workforce, then we should be able to have this stream of information about me and every other person passing the system, so we can just start looking at some, I'm going to say, data assessment to one, understand if we're getting the right information, and two, then be able to scale along and potentially ask different questions, which might be you ask the wrong thing in the first place.
Part of the problem is we can't look at individuals because there's for FERPA and all kind of other privacy issues. What we need is the kind of data so that we can generalize and aggregate and talk about the group of people that all have similar characteristics. So you do have to build the system with individuals in it and with fields exactly like what you described, and probably a lot more, because people end up getting a lot more than one degree and they end up going to a lot more than one school and so forth. But those are exactly the kind of elements that ultimately need to be in. But what I was thinking about is what are some general aggregate reports that would be helpful in terms of the students who need a certain amount of remediation when they start get the same kind of jobs once they do graduate as students that don't. That might not be a very good question. But what kind of jobs are people getting? I've got a data set right now I've been working with everybody that graduated in 8, 9, and 12, 13, and the match to the UI file. And so I can see, do they get jobs 1 year out? And for the earlier group, what kind of jobs do they have 5 years out? What's the average salary? What industry are they working in? Is there any kind of correlation between the major they got the degree in and the industry they're working in now? Just that simple little file is complex enough. And I haven't even come up with really good ways to summarize it yet. I'm able to do a number of different crosstabs and summarize. It doesn't.
May I ask, speaking?
There you have to keep it very aggregate. And you get real small numbers. We have to have rules in terms of what we do when we have cell sizes that are very small.
Let's hear there's a question on the cell phone. Can we take that? Go ahead.
So I just was speaking at that time that was talking about they have data that they've been utilizing and doing some matching. Who was that speaking? Please, this is Mike.
This is Mark Chisholm. I'm sorry. I should have identified myself for those people on the phone.
So Mark, you have data that you received from us and that you shared with Workforce.
The data we've matched to Workforce is the higher education completion data. We have not linked that to data from you at this time. Down the road.
So you haven't linked. You have it, right? Because what I want to do is, let's back up a little bit here, and I want to go back to Brent's discussion about the data sets that he provided, or the data sets that we put together, and they were put together by each of the agencies, right? As far as I know PED and Workforce worked through those things. HED, I'm sure you guys did as well. And that's kind of basically where we're at right now. We're looking at how do we link these together to get a good positive match. When you look at the bulk of the data that comes through the system, it's coming from the PED system and the STAR system. When we roll that up to HED, we roll it up and we were getting about an 87% match rate, and it's only addressing about 30% of our students statewide. When we start working with Workforce Solutions, we run into the Social Security buzzsaw, and we're working through MOUs with that as well, but that's 70% of the rest of the student population. So how do we account for them coming out of PED directly into the workforce? And then to answer some of the federal questions, how do we track them with the Department of Defense if they went into the military, the Department of Justice, when we're talking about juvenile justice, and we're also talking about adult justice and the corrections. So when I mentioned collaboration earlier, that's basically what I've been talking about. We've been doing an enormous amount of work in the last 2 years with this council to bring these data sets together. And yes, they may be siloed at this point in time, but I think the focus should be not only in data governance, but also should be on the building of our data set and incorporating the master personal index so that we can share data, of which the MOU allows us to do. So I don't know if that clarifies a lot of this discussion, but I think we need to bring a little bit of the history in there. There has been an immense amount of work. I think we're at the cusp of putting it together, and we just need that centralized location, that database build, a centralized repository. How are we going to manage and data governance? Data governance has been such a thorn in our side that we really need to get that nailed down. I want to go back to Ray's comments as well. Absolutely. We've been attending meetings with, and AOC is on the line, I believe. Angela, you're on the line. We got to get these agencies more involved with us because there's a ton of information that needs to run through the SLDS. So even though, with all due respect, Madam Secretary, it's been taking a while, however, there's an immense amount of work that's been done to collect these data sets. And I think if we just start looking forward from here, how do we solve this centralized data collection and the master personal identifier so that we make sure that we're providing good, solid, accurate data. So with that said, y'all can continue the discussion.
I agree with everything you said, Michael, and that's why we haven't put any data in the prototype yet. The example I mentioned with matching HED data to UI was just an example of something we're doing within the agency with our own data that we're, as an example of the kind of match that could happen once the SLDS was built. But we haven't made any decisions yet in terms of what actually goes into the prototype, what data, what we do with it. That needs to be a broader discussion. So I don't want to confuse the example I gave to imply that we've actually put anything in the prototype yet. We haven't. That was just an example of one of the types of things that could be done once we built the prototype, which is, so, but I don't disagree with anything you said, and because of all of that and needing all come together, that's why we actually haven't put any data in the prototype yet. We all have to agree what scope, what we're going to try to do in this first sort of sandbox while all these other activities are going forward and things get fleshed out, assuming that we even continue. It was just, we talked about it at the last meeting, and there was some agreement there that getting some concrete results with what we do currently have access to in the short run would have long-term benefits. But there's not a single thing you mentioned that I disagree with. All of that is important at the back end. When we have something that no longer has the word prototype in it, it has to take into account everything you just mentioned.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's good to hear progress is being made. That's helpful and educational for me. You want to talk about governance, Dan?
Oh. A lot of it I've discussed already. Just a few things that maybe I'll mention at this point, because most of it got pretty well discussed. First, I'd like to ask you, Britt, you mentioned there's parallel efforts going on. I've caught several of them, and we stopped them, reined them in, and let's get our resources together. We never saw the resources, but they never pursued it either. But who else is, what other
projects? Well, Michael's folks have been very actively working on matching out the workforce as well, so that, you know, when you talk about a longitudinal data set here, he's sort of been working on a longitudinal data set there as well. And that's where all these processes eventually need to get tied together.
Oh, well that, yeah, okay.
So that's when I talk about there are efforts, and to get CYFD involved in that. There's other agencies that get involved in that process. But fundamentally, the goal, recognizing there's a big governance issue, and realizing it becomes data integration is everybody that passes through the system, there's a set of data we want to know about them all the way through in every agency, who that person is, be a unique identifier, not SSN, because there's too many traps in that process, so that then you can go mine what the data I gave you. Mike Archfield has a list from me as well. Joy has a list from me as well, and that say, let's go look at this entire set and try and say we can look at people do that. And now, what questions do we really want to ask? And so governance is critical. Matching and governance are the only two questions for me. Fundamentally, the granularity of the question below that is almost irrelevant to me at this point. I know that data's there. I asked Mike for a third grade score, I asked for a dual credit, I had a whole list. But ultimately, that's irrelevant. If Mike can say, I know who this person is, and you can say here, you know who this person is, and DWS can say, I know who this person is, and CYFD says, I know who this person is. You only really are. I can ask questions.
Okay, my thought, I thought we said parallel would be somebody else building an SLDS, but all these efforts that Mike is doing in CYFD is part of this process. This is the pieces that are going to be brought together. And we're talking, so it isn't something happening outside the system. It's still happening within this collaborative effort. I thought somebody completely out was just doing a whole different thing. But this is all still part of the same process. Okay, that's cool.
Dan, if I can add to that.
And that's the point I was trying to make. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Mike Archvick said that was the point he was trying to make, and I'd like to add to that a little bit. You guys have, I believe you have what we call big data. Okay? It is a big data set, and there's no way that all of that information right now is manageable in a single database. Your UI system alone is a monster. It is a monster with all kinds of rules and regulations and control factors. And we just deployed it last year, and things are going well. But that alone is a huge system. And you add all that student information from PED, and then it just grows and grows. And pretty soon you've got
It's a manageable file.
And the question that I struggle with at these meetings, and I've been to a few over the last 8 quarters or so, is what is the objective at the end of the day? And the objective, I think, very rudimentally, the objective is to be able to answer hard questions. We know we have information, but we want to use that information to back up answers to hard questions. And you know, if we could use the UI data today to answer a hard question, that chunk of data would not answer the same question the same way in 2 years. All kinds of things are going to change in that UI system. New information, it's going to grow, it's going to become better and stronger. So when we ask it a question, we have to be able to grab a point in time, say, at this point in time, using this data, that data, and the other data, this is the smartest answer we can come up with to your question. To your point, governance is critical. We have to be able to, you know, in another world, CYFD, there was a child who was at danger, and public safety was put out a call. They didn't have the information they needed to protect that child appropriately, and it ended tragically. We are looking at ways to keep that from happening. In our world, if we had an instant, oh my gosh, situation, could we come together with our existing governance data structure and share data in such a way that we could answer those questions in real time? No, we're not there. Does it matter what infrastructure we use or what kind of data mining equipment we use? Or it does, because we have to take cost in the factory. This is, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is mostly an unfunded mandate.
Yeah.
we have to use what we have. We can't, you know, it'd be easy to say, hey, Oracle, can we just dump all our data on you guys and you guys answer, you know, do the research for us? Sure, that'll be $1 million a question. We don't have that kind of luxury. We have to figure it out with what we've got. That said, I think there's 2 different things that I can bring to this. One is you have to understand that your data is so big, you will never have a database that just has everything magically ready for you. You have to have a governance structure where you can connect your big data together when you need to. You need to connect the most recent, most best data, most best data that you can, the best and answer those questions as well as we can. You know, like the fiscal impact reports we get during this season, right? We try to give them the best information we can, given the sources that we have. You're going to always have big data. I don't foresee that changing, at least during my career. The second thing, though, that you have is what I call a project. There are things going on under the scope of this data council that do have a beginning and an end, that are achievable. We talked about the Race to the Top grant a few minutes ago, or it's one grant with multiple projects under. Those are defined projects. We're going to start here, we're going to end here. It's going to cost us this much money, this much time, this much work to complete an objective. If you look at your questions as projects, it's one way to approach this. But I think before you have that, you have what Steve was referring to, the governance structure to make those projects happen. So even before we get to answering the questions, do we have the governance structure? I would almost say that building that kind of relationship, because it's at the secretary level where the secretaries can say, hey Dan, hey Mike, go make this thing happen. And we have to say yes sir, yes sir. But it's also at the ground boots level where the data guys are getting together and they're saying, okay, we can connect this way. When you're talking about bringing two data sets together, it sounds easy. Okay, let's connect MyFACA and MyFACA from these two sets. But there's a huge QA/QC component that blows it out of the water. I used to do this for New Mexico State University way back in the day. And it's hard. It's hard. Being able to have a reliable, the statistics actually one with the T-cell test and all those things, all of those components come up and they're real. They're very real. But the governance structure, it's that, I would say, a charter that kind of organizes this group is probably paramount. It's probably one of the first things we want to make sure everybody understands and agrees to. I can't remember if there's one that exists. It just needs to be maybe refreshed once again.
Populated. There's a structure that's been agreed to, and I've been hollering that. I've been preaching that for every council, and this one happens so much. I'm hoping having a secretary now involved should be a big key to getting the right people into the governance through the secretaries and getting that. That's the only thing we haven't tried yet to get that.
So I think that bears revisiting, maybe a subcommittee of this group or something to bring it back for next quarter. But then the last thing I'll say, and then I'll be quiet, so I've been talking for a while. The last thing I'll say is sometimes having an action item or a question, in this case, an objective, a concrete objective, call it your proof of concept, call it a proof that this data council is actually doing something. I don't know if there's anything going on now that the teams can work towards. It sounds like via Race to the Top or via the, I can't remember what Mike Archibald called it, but there's a project that he's working on right now that's kind of parallel to this one. If there's some way this data council can provide value add to those projects, I think it's working.
Yeah. And the governance, when you look at what makes up the council, except for the secretaries, there's a good bit of secretaries assigned, but the huge bulk is all educators. And so when it comes to governance, we need to go way beyond that too. We need workforce needs representation, CYFP. So, and I've tried. I think everybody here knows I've tried and tried. We've had meetings. They've tried to send some. We've had people. Anyway, we just have not had the entire. But I really hope with Secretary Dameron's help it's going to be considerably different. And we maybe get another angle to, for sure. Because we do. We have to have, because they're the architects. People like Stephen's the ones with the hammers, and they're the builders of the house. But you can't build a house without the blueprint. You need the blueprint laid down by the governance. And so, yeah, I've been preaching.
Dan, this is Julie at Workforce. I just wanted to know, as part of this conversation, too, that we are pulling technical discussions together here, and I haven't heard you guys mention that, so I just wanted to put that out there for everybody.
Well, we have that every 2 weeks. We have what's called data custodian meetings. Every 2 weeks we have been having technical meetings. So that group is well populated and well represented. It's the governance group. So every 2 weeks the bottom group is having meetings.
So it keeps going back to, I think right here everybody's saying is the governance part, the leadership of all this, how are we going to tie all this together, who's going to drive the questions, thank you. Y'all put me into places I don't want to be. And who's going to drive this, who's going to decide what questions could be asked, that's going to impart, at least in my scientific background, the questions would determine the technical structure. I mean, we kind of put those questions in first. We have our scientific questions, then we look at our methodology, then we look at the structure for which we're going to be doing that. So Yeah, I do see there's a need with that. I think there needs to be conversations, I guess, with other secretaries, wherever y'all are suggesting here, and y'all the ones what's going on, what needs to be done with this. So what are some of the suggestions? What is the next step that needs to be taken to get this done and moving?
Our group is the team that actually that Michael was describing, where in college and career readiness, we administer the Perkins Grant, and we are actually responsible to report to the feds what happens to kids when they graduate from high school. So this is why I work with HED. I'm trying to figure out what happened to my kids. Did they go to college? And then I work with DWS, and I try to find out, did they get a job? And all I know is that I was able to find 55% of my kids. I don't know if that's because the data doesn't match or the kids have dropped out of the sphere. And so as a first research question, I might suggest we try to estimate how many people we're losing as we move from one system to the next. If I give you PED data, how many of those people are just disappearing as we move through the system? As a very first research question that I think is really important to determine the viability of the project.
So your Perkins Grant is looking at all students in New Mexico, looking at statewide or a subset?
It's a subset. Yeah.
Defined by what?
By whether they participated in career technical education.
Okay.
Well, that's highlighting really the first step in this, if we want to call this a project is we got to get the matching.
Yeah.
That's number one.
And if you can't get it at 100%, are you at 50%? Are you at 80%?
So the basic question that Mike and Andy and some of these guys have been sort of working towards for me is they said, how many people graduated? I gave the list, but I said, how many people graduated in 2012, 9, 8, and 3? It's been a couple years. I want that total count. And then I wanted to, and my question was, do we know where these people went? Is that 20,000 people graduated, and we know that 8,000 went to higher ed, that we figured out that some other portion went to the workforce. How many are we missing, and then why are we missing that group? Is the fundamental the scoring of essentially what Dan's talking about. That's how we're trying to score a matching process. So you can say, now we come out of PED, I know where 85% of them go. I might not even know if they're successful or not, but I know that 32% are in HED, 30% are in the workforce, 3% are in prison, 17% are in the armed forces, whatever math that works out, so we know where they went. There's no other questions. If you don't know the disposition, you can't ask any other question about them.
How are other states addressing
it? Can I please address that, because yeah, there has been some work done there. So this is where we're at with it, and this is Mike. This is where we're at with that one. That data set that was sent up to HED. So Dan, I'm hoping now, and Madam Secretary, that the doors are open, that we can get the data set back to answer the question that Bryn was just talking about, because we sent the data set to HED. We hadn't had any return back from HED at this point, so that we can make that match. Again, that's about 30% of our kids. Where we hit the fence, we hit the brick wall.
Time out. Hold on. Sorry, I got to get this one go along. So yes, so first and foremost, yes, we want to be able to exchange data sets, and we're open and all that kind of stuff. And I've heard what was in the past. I've read that we are here. We're going to cooperate and exchange data sets and get things going. So that's that. But while you're talking, Mike, I'm seeing some conversation about whether that data set is here. Are we unclear about that?
We are unclear about which data sets. We have done several matches for several different reports, Mike. And so if you're referring to a particular data set,
Guys, actually, this is
Andy.
I
have Andy here. So
this is Andy, and basically we're talking about the graduation data that we sent. It's a long time ago, and we still have it on the transfer side if you want to actually get it back down again if y'all haven't been able to find it.
Yeah.
But it's actually the data that we were trying to do for Brent's questions.
Right.
And it was during that time frame, and it has all the graduates, and it's like we had one set that was a cohort data, and the other set was just grads data, and they're all up there. And we noticed y'all did pull it down because we could tell that, but we did get numbers from Stephen saying, well, here's what we matched, but Stephen wanted to improve the matching, which is a good thing to do.
Sure.
So,
yeah, right.
So the question is, can we just get what we got already matching so we could get these connections, so we give this data to Brent, so he can get Peter Winograd to get his little analytical stuff, and then what Mike was talking about is the brick wall with Workforce that we're trying to work through on a sidebar with them.
Right. And so I have Workforce on, so I'll continue with that piece. Yeah, that wasn't the dig or anything like that. I just wanted to say this is where we're at right now, and I think if we can get...
What we have, what we don't have.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, keep going. Yeah, I didn't take it as a dig. I just need to be clear what we have, what we don't have.
I don't think you can get a hold of you guys and clarify. I don't think we should take the council time for this.
Yeah, so we'll check into that. I mean, it can just be sent again. Surely we can send data. Okay, so...
If I might just...
Okay, so I'd like to go to the side and give you guys all an update on what's happening on the work side, because we are faced with a major problem there, but I think we're working through it, and that was the meeting last week, because we can't do any matching with Workforce Solutions because we don't dabble in the Social Security number. So we're looking for other avenues, and Sue-Ann, the CIO, and Julie's on the line as well, are working with the National Social Security Administration, and we're going to hopefully open that door, but that's an MOU that has to be worked on as in place. So I just wanted to give you a general idea of where we're at in relation to the data set that Brent has been talking about. And that's it.
Give a big score. I can send stuff back and forth, just sample data. There seems to be about an 80% match up and back with HED for those who come to HED. When we tried the same match into DWS, Mike, help me out here if I'm overstating it, but it was sub 1% was the match because of this lack of identifier.
Did you say less than 10%?
I said sub 1%.
Right. It was a pretty low percentage point of matching based on a direct match.
Yeah, I'm just saying, because there's not enough information to give to DWS to be able to make this correlation. That is truly a problem.
Okay. With that? Yeah. I just want to make one more mention of things, and then as far as I'm concerned, we can wrap it up. Anita Gavin here is doing a lot of work to help us. What she's doing, because she'll be contacting everybody's organizations, she's putting all the positions in statute on a spreadsheet, and she's going to start filling in names and contacting organizations and going through the procedure to actually flesh out the council appropriately according to statute. Well, customarily, we have like 5 or 6, usually from council, so we're going to really try to populate this with the right people. Anita's taking the lead in that. Also, she's putting a website together for us again. Anyway, we'll talk about that. But something happened to our other website. But she's putting another website together so we can keep all the information up online. So she's doing a lot of work there to help us. Just let you know what's happening there, and I'm done.
Is this meeting done? I'm still trying to understand how this works. Rather remarkable.
So I can add one thing, because you haven't answered the question, but it is governance, and something that you brought up from the DeWitt side. We've never defined what a user is. At this point in the game, and I speak as myself and the folks on the employability partnership, we are not trying to look into data to make a summary or to go to the general public or whatever. We're really looking at user-level information and trying to aggregate that information to understand if it is, I would say, viable, for lack of a term. Once we understand this basic data set of questions, our interest in that data is to say, is it telling me information that I can make use of? At that point, in order for that information to be available, as you put, for aggregate data on Mark's side of the house, or for Beaver, or for external sources, then there's going to have to be real governance. On the side where we're looking right now, we are literally wading in at the record level, or we want to wade in at the record level to say, yes, this is right, yes, this tells me something, I don't understand why these don't match up, so we can really validate the process. So when you refer to a user or whatever, I think there are actually tiers of users in this process. And at the fundamental level, the user that you're trying to service right now someone's trying to validate the connection in the model, the next tier up will be the internal committee, but I'll say state employees covered by law and regulation for you to look at that data. And even at that point, you may not be able to share it outside your use. And then you now start moving to this aggregate level where you may have some sort of dashboard or summary or the public. But we're not even that far. This governance is going to have to define who, what, where, and how to process. The only way, most of all you are, I'll call state employees, I am not. The only way I'm able to do this is that I am statutorily appointed to the workforce board, and I'm guided by those mandates and requirements. But if I was just Bryn Davis, Sapphire Energy, I don't see any of this data at this point, nor should I. And the other side is I actually really don't have any vested interest in the data. My interest is making the data right so that it can be passed on to the next level. So we've got to find users and get into this and tie it together.
It's in our scope. I don't know if you've seen the president thing I keep bringing up about 8 ARMA standards, about 8 basic standards of what should be elements of governance. One of them is accessibility. So we've discussed that really at length, but of course that'll come as we evolve. Those will have to be addressed. Who is allowed to have access? That is the foundation point for sure. It's on our scope.
Well, I appreciate you letting Deputy Eckstein and I attend today and get a feel for this because we're both very interested in moving forward. And it sounds like a lot of, no question, a lot of work has been done in a lot of different areas. That's very evident with a lot of the different agencies. Loads of work has been done. I'm interested in seeing how we move from here and how we bring all that together with the challenges there. So we'll move forward. So thank you all for letting us attend, and thanks for the work that everyone's been doing.
We do appreciate you. Thank you.
Over there.
Turn off this, please. File. Oh, there.
Michael? There's a red button on the phone.